I think you have to keep good stats on the cases you solve. And, the supervisor of that unit needs to be the cheerleader for that unit. You need to come in there and constantly sing your praises about, look at the success stories you've had. I have that saying, persistence beats resistance. That constant, persistent going in there and people don't like to toot their own horn or go in there and brag, but that's kind of the supervisor's job, to be the cheerleader of that unit, show success stories.
Hey there, my name's Ashley Church.
And I'm Erin West.
We were once newly promoted crime scene and latent print supervisors on mutual struggle buses as we both simultaneously tried to navigate through the challenges within our forensic units.
Now we run a business where we create tools and resources that we wish we had had to make these transitions easier. We like to talk about the experiences we've had in the forensic field, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in the hopes to create awareness around these issues and move the needle forward to create positive change in the forensic community.
So if you're a forensic professional, regardless of your years of experience, who's not afraid to dive into real, raw, and sometimes uncomfortable topics, you're in the right place.
This is the Forensics Unfiltered podcast.
This is the second bonus episode featuring another guest interview from our virtual summit. Last September, we hosted a free 4-day event titled Forensics Supervisor Success Summit, designed to help you thrive in a forensic supervisory position by setting goals, optimizing resources and skills, and getting organized. 768 registrants from 38 states and 14 countries were able to learn from 28 speakers and listen to 32 presentations. It was so wildly successful that we plan on hosting another one this year. But while we're preparing for the big event, we want to give you something to listen to while you wait. So every month this summer, we'll be featuring a presentation from the 2022 Forensic Supervisor Success Summit. On this bonus episode, we will be featuring a guest interview with Ryan Berry titled Having Conversations with Your Chain of Command. Ryan is a captain at the Osceola County Sheriff's Office and formerly part of Erin's chain of command. And if you love this episode, we know you will love the other presentations too. The presentations featured on Forensics Unfiltered make up only 15% of the entire summit. You can get instant access to replays for all 32 presentations in the All Access Pass on gapscience.teachable.com. We'll be sure to include all the links in the show notes, but again, you can go to gapscience.teachable.com and click on the All Access Pass. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hi guys, I'm Erin West with Gap Science, and today I have Captain Ryan Berry with the Osceola County Sheriff's Office here with us today. We're very excited to have a conversation with you guys about having better communication skills with your chain of command. So before we even dive into that topic, Captain Berry, if you'll tell us a little bit about your background and where you are now in your career and the path you've taken to get here.
All right. My name is Ryan Berry, as Erin said, and I'm a captain with Osceola County Sheriff's Office. I started my career in 1989, July 1989. And I know there's people in the room that are like, oh my God, I was a year old or I wasn't born yet, but so get that out of the way. So I started my career in corrections. I did about 2 years in corrections. And I went to patrol division. After that, I spent some time in patrol division training, doing FTO stuff, field training officer stuff, some felony squads, criminal investigations, DUI investigations and instruction. And then I discovered undercover drug work. So I did that for probably about 4 years. And after I was promoted, again, I supervised the narcotics task force for about 10 years after that, when I was promoted to sergeant. After that, I also, prior to the drug unit, I did some supervision in the FTO squad and tourism policing unit. So that was like a investigative unit as well in our tourism area. And then I was promoted to lieutenant and did some time as a watch commander on the road. After that, I went to our intel and crime analysis section. And I did about 6 years there, and I was promoted out of there as a captain in the criminal investigation section.
Yeah. And that's where you currently are, right?
That's where I currently am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
So, and he has been a captain over both the road and criminal investigations. And that was how we met, obviously.
Right.
The captain is my direct supervisor. And I believe, if I'm correct, that when you became the CID captain, was that the first time that the forensic divisions fell under your purview?
Yes. So one of the things we did when I took over criminal investigations, we looked at trying to pull some of those units back under CID. So I have all the property crimes, robbery, tourism policing unit, intel, violent crimes, special victims unit, persons unit. So the special victims covers like our sex crimes, child crimes, and intel and crime analysis. And we pulled forensics under that umbrella because we work so closely, obviously, with forensics, latents, and now evidence. But mainly, there's so many of those investigative units that rely heavily on forensics and latents to make solid cases. So it just made sense to pull everybody under the same umbrella. And I think we communicate a lot better because of that as a group, when it comes to the cases.
I would agree. We're thrilled to be part of the criminal investigations division.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of departments out there that are still housing forensics under like the records division. Some of you guys watching this now, that might be the case, but I do think it improves the communication between the investigative units to have it all be under one umbrella for sure. So,
yes.
So we have our forensic latent print and evidence unit are all civilian and all female, and we're very expensive. We're expensive units. So
yes, that you are.
Yes. So when we fell under your purview and you first started supervising the forensic units, was there anything that you were surprised to learn about the forensic units right out the gate?
Yeah, one of the things that I was surprised to learn about forensics was how, one of them was the cost, obviously, right? It was, you look at the cost of some of the things you guys have, and it was, there's sticker shock for sure. I kind of understood some of that because when I was in the drug unit, I had our lab unit as well, our clan lab unit. So as part of that, I learned a lot about that kind of stuff, and I understood why some of that stuff was so expensive. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I was kind of surprised about and I learned was how labor intensive some of the stuff that forensics is. I obviously had been around it most of my career, but really when I started looking at how you guys do your processes when it comes to, whether it's looking for blood spatter or DNA work or latent, processing latents, it's just, I was like pretty surprised how labor intensive, some of it was. So that was interesting to me. And I was kind of surprised to learn, like I said, I understood about certifying equipment, but I was surprised to learn that even, your rulers had to be certified. I was kind of floored by that. I was like, how can you change a ruler? It doesn't wear out or where, you're not sawing wood with it. So I'm not sure what exactly, but it was definitely a learning curve a little bit there.
There's a lot of expense attached to that too. Like even our, calibrating our Faro instruments once a year. Right. That costs like $8,000. And I think there's a lot of departments that probably don't get those calibrations done because they don't really understand the value of spending that kind of money to make sure the instruments are working properly every year. But yes, right. I would definitely agree with that. So I think a lot of supervisors do have that challenge of trying to get the equipment and the supplies that they need for the forensic unit, knowing that those things are expensive, sending that stuff up the chain and having it be declined because there are other areas of the agency where funding is seen as more necessary. So do you have any suggestions for the forensic supervisors out there for getting those kinds of budgetary requests through their chain of command, helping them understand the need for those types of items for their unit?
Yeah, I think for me, and this goes to your credit a lot, is just educating whoever's the supervisor to make them understand why it's important. You pull out all these gadgets at a crime scene, and a lot of the sworn guys are just looking at them, and they unless they have a direct attachment to that case, the detective that's working a homicide or, robbery guy, they may or may not understand, but they usually do. But I think it's really, the further you get away from that guy or girl who's working a scene or working the case, sometimes the further removed we get, and we're thinking about other things. But I really think for me, it was important to understand why things were the way they were and how important they were. I think it's just really trying to take time to educate, and that's going to be incumbent on the civilian supervisor who's over that unit to try to continually educate the supervision above them if it's sworn and they don't understand it, why it's so important, all the way from the scene to court. I think it's just important to educate as much as you can.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I try to do, or I've learned over the years, is the value of attaching the need to the agency's need and not
Correct.
necessarily just my unit's need. So the value for the agency as a whole. Do you think if that's an easier sell for you to the higher ups above you, if you can attach the need to the agency versus just the unit's need?
Absolutely. And I know there's going to be some departments, especially depending on the size, that the budgetary constraints are just going to be what they are. It's hard to overcome some of that stuff. But when they see the benefit to the agency, to the case, to the victim, and why we do what we do, I think that's the sell, for these guys that don't understand it quite yet.
For sure. I would agree. So what kind of recommendations do you have for either civilian or sworn supervisors that have just inherited a forensic unit? Are there any suggestions you have for them for getting in there and learning about their forensic unit?
Yeah, take the time to go learn. To go down there and look and see what they're doing. Show up when they're doing crime scene stuff. Show up when they're processing cars, and just sit back and watch. I learned a lot in those processes when we set up our brass tracks, and we set up our. I learned a lot about. We set up our conics, so we could shoot with the snail trap and all that stuff. And I learned more and more and more, and it was just really taking the time, carving out a couple hours a day and go down there and see what's going on and ask questions and learn about it. I think that's very important. For you to do that. Yeah. Somebody taking over that's new.
I think you had mentioned this the other day with our intel unit, how having solid knowledge about how the intel unit could be utilized has helped investigations. And I think that's the same with forensic units, is that the higher up you go, the more oversight you have on all of the units and how they're all interconnected and how you can use all the pieces to assist in an investigation. So I think that forensic units in some departments might be underutilized because the agency doesn't really understand how they could maybe assist in an investigation. Have you seen that to be true in
100%.
your experience?
One of the things that I think that we did that was successful since I was over there working with you was have a bit of a training session, I guess you would call it, where you came in and explained exactly what your capabilities are, not only in forensics, but in latents. Latents in the past, coming up through law enforcement, latents was very hit and miss sometimes about, what kind of results we got, right? So you see guys that don't see the importance sometimes of latents prints. And I know that since I've been working with you and you've had our latent section, and we have a very talented group of ladies in latents as well, our latent print hits have just skyrocketed. I don't know what the stats are, but I can tell you we get latent print hits constantly. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the detectives didn't understand exactly what the capabilities of the latent print unit was and the forensic unit was. And having that sit down with all the detectives and take an hour so you can explain the capabilities was great. One of the cases I know that stands out to me that I didn't know the capabilities of the latent unit was we had a convicted felon suspect on Facebook who kept posting pictures of guns but would never post his face in them. One of the challenges was proving it was a firearm, which we were able to overcome through a firearms expert. But then the other one was obviously his face wasn't in the picture. Well, one of the pictures was nice, high res, and we could see a picture of his fingerprint. And I don't remember if it was you or somebody in Layton said, hey, we can pull that from the picture. And we successfully were able to prove it was him in the picture.
Yeah.
And that was a complete surprise to me. I didn't realize that was even a possibility. So
Yeah.
that's been a learning curve. And I think you have to constantly have that conversation with detectives, because you have new detectives that come in, right? They're, for us, we have several new detectives right now training, and we probably need to sit down soon again and just have a little roundtable and say, hey, this is the capabilities, use us. And this is what you can use us for. That's important, I think, on a regular basis.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think going back to funding and
Yes.
asking for expensive things, I think that if your department is providing results for the investigations and the detectives, you would be more likely to be supported for the funding needs that you have. Would you say that's
Yes.
accurate?
Yes, I would. Yes.
Yes.
100%.
And sometimes that just takes a time investment, to get your forensic units up to the point where they are truly contributing, and detectives really feel like there's value for you to, be able to get the supplies that you need. So
yes, it's a lot to bite off, just in the last year and a half, we've invested a lot of money, I think, into Layton's and forensics both, bringing the NIBIN in there, bringing our own APHIS system in, things like that. But it's definitely an investment into, let's face it, the way technology grows is it's constantly evolving, right? And forensics and Layton's have evolved with the rest of the stuff, and along with digital forensics. If you're not investing in that in the future, you're going to be behind the 8 ball for sure in law enforcement.
Absolutely. So another thing that comes up in our trainings a lot is our forensic training programs, the length of them, and a lot of departments wanting to push people through the training programs quicker. So there's a body out there on call, and we're filling those holes and getting the casework done in a quicker manner. We ourselves have lengthy training programs, but I've never really received any pushback from anyone above about the length of our training programs, or the quality of the trainees that are coming out of those. So how can forensic supervisors justify the need for a longer training program, to make sure that they have all the skills versus, when their chain of command is trying to get them to push people out faster?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Sometimes I think if you sing your praises, I think you have to keep good stats on the cases you solve. And, the supervisor of that unit needs to be the cheerleader for that unit. You need to come in there and constantly sing your praises about, look at the success stories you've had. I have that saying, persistence beats resistance. That constant, persistent going in there, and people don't like to toot their own horn or go in there and brag, but that's kind of the supervisor's job, to be the cheerleader of that unit and show success stories. If they see the importance of that, I think they'll see the importance of the training. I also hope that the agencies would follow. The training should be in policy, right? And I think if it's outlined in policy and it's there in black and white, and this is what has to be done all the way through the process, you would have a harder time, or more, I guess, of a harder time of somebody arguing with you saying, hey, you need to cut this short because it's in black and white, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just think that, I don't know, those are the two things I would suggest that you do to do that. So I know sometimes you're faced with a lot of adversity when it comes to that, and people don't understand. But again, if you educate and sing your praises, I don't know how they argue with that, with the success stories.
I agree with that. And I think that we stopped having difficulty with it when we made a concrete training manual that was written down. I know a lot of
Yes.
agencies don't have that, and they're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants regarding how they actually train people. But once we had a concrete structure of like, this is what we train, this is the length of each module, it was pretty, cut and dry as far as what the training program was going to contain. And then also, I think it was easy for you guys to say, how much longer is the training program? And we could very matter-of-factly be like, they have 4 modules left, they have 4 weeks left, or whatever, as opposed to some departments where it's just arbitrary. Like,
right.
We're not
100%.
certain when they're ending. So for our civilian supervisors out there, which we have a lot of them, and they're reporting to a sworn chain of command, but that sworn chain of command doesn't particularly seem to be interested in learning about forensics, or Like we've talked about before, some sworn supervisors see it almost as a punishment to be placed over civilians versus supervising sworn personnel. So do you have any recommendations for civilian supervisors on engaging their sworn chain of command to, to get them interested in the units and what they're doing and the value of the units?
That's probably the toughest one of the toughest question of this whole session. I can tell you that, again, persistence beats resistance in my career. I would imagine if you're facing somebody who doesn't get the value of that and who's pushing back on you or doesn't really, see what you're trying to do or is not happy because they're, supervising. And even in sworn, law enforcement's we're real bad sometimes about eating our own. And we really need to become better about that as a culture. But I think what you have to do is just continually sing your praises, continually show your successes, because if you build good teams and they see the value in building good teams, it just makes your job so much easier as a manager. Then it solves its own argument, right? Because if other than having to put money into a unit like forensics to get them up to speed, if they're having success stories, it just makes you look good. So that's why I think that they just have to try to keep singing their own praises, try to be a cheerleader. The egos can be tough. Yeah. That's a hard one sometimes to overcome. That's very tough.
And if all else fails, you can just be patient, because
yes, and sometimes it requires patience. Sometimes it's timing. Sometimes you just don't know. I mean, I get that. I've dealt with different dynamics in my career, different administrations. Dealing with other departments. Other department heads that are over the same thing that maybe I'm over, and I call and we're trying to work out issues. And sometimes I just don't get it. We're not on the same wavelength, I guess, sometimes. But I really think that it's like I tell everybody, just keep, plugging away at it. I've had success at that in my career. I've been told, in the drug unit, I tried to start certain processes, and I'll give you an example. I wanted to do a single purpose drug dog when I was in the task force. And for 3 years in a row, about every 6 months, I answered to a board of directors. I presented it to a board of directors, and I did all the research. Erin knows I'm a very high C on the DISC profile, so I did all my research.
Very detail oriented, yes.
Very detail oriented. And I kept for 3 years. They told me no. They turned me down for 3 years. About the fourth, fifth time I presented it over that 3 year period, at the end, they let me do it, and it has been just a huge success. Not to my anything I did other than want to start it. The handlers worked really hard, and it's very, very lucrative. The way we do it, and so just keep plugging away at them.
Yeah, I think we see that a lot with people just giving up too soon. When you do have needs for your unit, you have to play the long game. Yes. And basically cycle those things around. If you bring an idea or something that you really need to the forefront and you're told no, maybe it was the wrong time, maybe there wasn't money, maybe you asked the wrong person. And we hear a lot of people that are just like, oh, they said no, they'll never get it for me, and they never ask for it again. So you have to be willing to keep coming back to that item if it really is a need, for sure.
100%. As a supervisor or manager, you should identify those things and if, like you said, if you're told no, put them back on the list somewhere and come back at them again, because you know what you need for that unit more than I do, and you should come and argue for it 100%.
Oh, yes. I'm sure you've realized this at this point, but I always keep my ears open for opportunities.
I know you do.
I keep a running list at all times.
That's good.
Yeah. Like if there's an opportunity and there's extra money that has to be spent, I have something that we need to buy.
No, that's good.
A last question here. So we have a lot of, in the training classes, a lot of the civilian sworn dichotomy comes up. Do you have any suggestions for our civilian supervisors out there for just being able to earn the respect of their sworn counterparts more quickly?
That's a tough one too. I think it just depends on personalities, egos. I can tell you, after a little over 33 years of being a cop, I still don't get along with most cops sometimes, just the way And I think some of it has to do with maturity when it comes to, a younger guy maybe doesn't see the value in that. I think there's some law enforcement culture there. But I don't know, the biggest thing is I feel like is when they see your value, when they see you'll earn a lot of respect just in that aspect. These guys have cases and, they're getting DNA hits off of the smallest thing or a print off the smallest, I'm just thinking in my head of things that I've seen. I think we had a commercial robbery in the last year where a guy picked up a cold drink, walked over, set it down, did the robbery, and we were able to get a print off the cold drink. I'm saying just things that which solve that case. And I think that when they realize the value of that, I think that's automatically going to make them gain respect. But I also think that sometimes, unfortunately, sworn guys, supervision or whoever, think that they're better than a civilian. And I don't know why. I think that everybody should have a seat at that table. I think if, like for us, as we have our weekly meetings with all the managers, and you're there with the sworn lieutenants, and you have a voice and you have a seat at the table, and as you should, because what you bring to the table is the value of, knowing what can be done to help those cases out. And sometimes that 100% makes or breaks a case, especially when it comes to people, vulnerable victims, whether it be special victims unit, sex crimes, or somebody who's dead and can't speak for themselves. Right. And when you look at it from an agency standpoint, to better the agency, juries expect it. If you go to trial, juries expect to see science. It's all over television, right? Yeah. They think you can pull rabbits out of the hat all the time. But that's just a tough, like I said, just keep plugging away, keep showing them your value, because you're automatically going to earn respect just by showing them what you can do. Yeah. So put the work in to do it. And, it's unfortunate if the respect isn't there automatically, because it should be. But I just say keep plugging away at it. Yeah.
I think it does. Yeah, it does take a little bit more to earn the same respect as a civilian, because the sworn are clearly marked. You know what everybody's rank is, and that rank is respected automatically. And the civilians, I don't look any different than any of my civilians. There's plenty of people at the department who have no idea who I am, but right. But even the people that are at my own level, I think sometimes civilian supervisors come in a little too aggressive with
right.
I'm also at a sergeant level, or I'm also at a lieutenant level, and kind of put that foot down and rub people the wrong way. So I think it's really important to build those bridges and, work on those relationships, and it will really help. But yeah, the civilian sworn is certainly a challenge.
It definitely is.
So before we head out for the day, do you have any other thoughts or anything for our supervisors out there, or anyone who just inherited a forensic unit, before we leave this session?
No, I don't think so. I think other than just, really understand what you guys do is important. Please sing your praises, your people when you're out there, because they do a lot of hard work. They do a lot of work that nobody else wants to do. Mm-hmm. When you see, and I've seen it multiple times in my career, us digging through, decomposing body parts things. Or just horrific conditions, and these girls and guys will get out there and do that. And it's important to do it. Right. So just support them. If your departments don't have some kind of crisis unit or some kind of unit like that to help, we've started trying to plug in, as our staff counselor into more debriefs when it comes to that thing. I've been at several myself, critical incident debriefs with some of your folks from forensics. And you don't see a lot of the forensics girls, at least our forensic girls, they come off as hard and callous as a lot of law enforcement does. And, you'll talk about crazy things, decomp or whatever. But in those debriefs, you can see the scars that makes, right?
Yeah.
So regardless if we joke it off or not, and we do, it definitely makes scars. So be there to support your people and pay attention to that. I think that's important as a supervisor. And hopefully your department is plugged in somewhere where they can do some critical incident debriefs, because that's necessary, and it's important for the longevity of your people in those units too.
Yeah.
So that's a suggestion I would definitely make.
I know that's kind of off topic of this today, but the last debrief we had on one of our last homicides, that was the first one that I went to for that. And I'm definitely that type of person that's like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. Like,
Sure.
I'm just going to
Same
shove
way.
them down. Yeah, I'm just going to shove them
Yeah.
down and I'll be fine. I don't want to talk about it in a group of people. But I actually did enjoy the debrief. So, and I was surprised by that as well, because we do that in law enforcement and forensics. We crack a lot of jokes. We have a hard shell. We know we're out there. We have to do our job. And there was a lot of soft things shared in there. So, but it was good. So I would definitely recommend that as well. I think that's very helpful for your people, for sure. So, all right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. If you'd like to reach out to Captain Ryan Berry with any of your questions or any suggestions from him, his email will be on the screen. We really hope that you guys enjoy the rest of the Forensics Supervisor Summit, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, we hope you enjoyed this bonus episode of the Forensics Unfiltered podcast. Just a reminder, if you want instant access to this guest interview and over 30 more presentations like it, get the All Access Pass at gapscience.teachable.com. The link is waiting for you in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here and listening to Forensics Unfiltered. If you liked this episode, would you do us a favor and leave a review letting us know specifically what you liked about this topic? It will only take a minute, but it will really help us plan future episodes so we can bring you more topics that you want to listen to. We'll be sure to provide any links from today's episode in our show notes on our website. Head to www.gapscience.com. Until next time, stay safe out there.